Of Public Service and Administration, Chabane. He's joining us from our Cape Town studio. Good morning to you, Minister. A lot of questions being asked after last night. I suppose the content of the speech was overshadowed. Two questions that have emerged was, the first perhaps is, who authorized the scrambling of the cell phone signal? Because the Speaker admitted it was an issue and then she said that she would sort it out, which she did. So how did that happen?
Obviously, you would know that our country is structured into three arms of the state. That is the judiciary, the parliament, and also the executive. So issues which happens in parliament, members of the executive are just there as members of parliament, but the speaker and the presiding officers actually make decisions on that. So I would not know, because no member of the executive council, of the executive, or cabinet ever authorized or interfered with the operations of parliament.
So you're saying that the Speaker ultimately would have authorized the blocking of the signal?
I'm not saying the Speaker would have authorized, but I'm saying it's the responsibility of parliament of what happens in parliament. So amongst them, the Secretary of Parliament and those who are responsible for that, they should be able to account at some point to say what happened.
And were the members of the South African police among those men who ejected the EFF?
Obviously, I think all of us would have seen, I wouldn't know, but as you know, in terms of the law, the Speaker has the authority to call or any security structure, including the police, if possible, to maintain order in Parliament. So I wouldn't be sure whether amongst those who were there are members of the parliamentary security services, or amongst them also included the police.
Minister, pandemonium is just one of the words that has described yesterday's proceedings. Is the ANC or even our President Jacob Zuma worried about what happened last night?
Obviously, all South Africans are worried, including the President himself, because we need to keep that institution, which is Parliament of the people, so that it is able to discharge its functions without being hindered by any one of us who are members there. So every one of us are worried about it, and we hope that Parliament will be able to sort it out.
Is there a sense in the ruling party, I know it's only a few hours after the event, are you going to do things differently to try to avoid this in future?
I'm not sure what is it that differently must be done, because the operations of Parliament is according to the rules of Parliament. After elections, you have got members of Parliament, you have got members of various parties in Parliament, you have got vibrant debates which takes place in Parliament. So it's for Parliament to see if they have to tighten the rules or to try and motivate members of Parliament to act in a manner which will keep the decorum of the House.
Minister, one of the key issues that President Jacob Zuma aimed to tackle was around Eskom. We have different opinions on it, analysts saying not a lot of detail was given into that. Do you think that the President has said enough to allay fears to investors that the situation is under control?
We think the President has outlined the steps which government is taking to deal with the energy shortages which we have in the country. And we hope that investors are going to understand and come to the party. Because amongst other things, the President had announced that was speeding up the process of allowing IPPs, that independent power producers, to produce from coal, to add to the grid, and also that the usage of energy, the supply and the demand, we need to manage the demand side quite carefully so that we're able to relieve the pressure which is on the system itself. So we think the President has made several steps. The announcement that Eskom is going to be given additional funding, at least to deal with the immediate challenges which they have, and also the announcement that there's a war room, the Deputy President has been given the responsibility to assist our state-owned companies like Eskom to begin to function properly. So that work is ongoing, and we think we'll be able to bring the system under control.
We don't always expect fireworks in the presidential address, Minister, but there was a sense that a lot of what the President was saying we've heard before, some of it repackaged, and there is increasing frustration among commentators and business people are saying the National Development Plan is a very good plan, there are a lot of good elements in it, but we have yet to see the implementation. And I don't think there was much about implementation last night that we haven't heard before. When are we going to see some action with the NDP?
We said after the NDP was adopted that once the NDP is adopted, the first 5 years we are going to break it down into chunks of 5 years as we do our medium-term strategic framework. At the current medium-term strategic framework of the 14 outcomes which have been identified are actually addressing the issues which are in the NDP. The president could not have, in that short space of time, encompassed and addressed all the issues which are there, from health to social welfare to social cohesion and so on and so forth. But every plan, if you look at our strategic plan, it's actually the implementation of the NDP. And we think the first 5 years is going to lay the good foundation for the NDP to be implemented as we go forward.
Minister, some of the other issues, and I'm just reading from President Jacob Zuma's speech, it talks about foreign nationals will not be allowed to own land in South Africa, but will be eligible for long-term leases. This is not new information, but again, we are talking about implementation. Timelines with regards to this?
Obviously, the president did, when addressing the land issue, he didn't only deal with the issue of foreign land ownership. He also dealt with the limitation which is going to be imposed of 12,000 hectares per individual if you want to own land. It's because of the challenges which we face, because the majority of our people have never had access to land, and it's important for us as a state and as government to try and take measures which are going to protect our citizens to be able to own land. South Africa is not the first country where there are restrictions on land ownership, and people continue to invest in those countries in spite of the fact that in some of the areas you can't even own land. Even if you are a citizen there, you have to take it on lease. So we believe that the steps which the government are taking is meant to address the issues of land hunger amongst our people, and for us to be able to bring most of the areas into definite production.
Talking of land, Minister, there's that controversial proposal that farmers may own no more than 12,000 hectares of land. The point has been made by many of the farming bodies. In areas like the Karoo, you can't farm on 12,000 hectares. You need 5 times the amount of land to graze, for example, than you do in KwaZulu-Natal. Doesn't sound like this was very well thought through. Are you going to negotiate that?
Obviously, once South Africa is a democratic country, once the government has set its sights or set programs in place, we don't implement until we have consulted with all the stakeholders. At least consensus has been reached as to what is supposed to happen. So now the Department of Land Affairs, the Department of Agriculture, and the economic cluster will engage in the consultation process with the various stakeholders to ensure that at the end, all of us are happy about what we think, and the rationale is understood by everybody and the context of what we're dealing with.
Finally, Minister, the State President had a later night last night than he was supposed to have, but his schedule moves on. Apparently he's playing golf today. Is that with members of Parliament, with business? What kind of event's that going to be?
The President, as you know, after the State of the Nation address, there was a bit of dinner, and then from dinner to this morning he was addressing a breakfast session with SABC, and then from there he's going to a golf for his charity. He has got a charity which he raised funds for students. Up to now, since its inception, they've taken more than 24,000 students to university. Some of them are qualified lawyers and doctors and accountants and so on and so forth. So we raised money for that event to make sure that the children who are not able to go to school, especially from orphans and the destitute, they're able to get money to go to school, because the President is very passionate about education of the children.
I would imagine that Julius Malema won't be a member of the four ball. Thanks to the Minister of Public Service and Administration, Chabane, for joining us from our Cape Town studio this morning.